Hey everybody, welcome back to Black Hole Sun Podcast Afterthought. This is a show where we talk about a podcast episode with more in depth, or maybe I forgot something, or maybe I learned something new after I recorded the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Before anything else, please subscribe to my channel, turn on the notification button. I try to have videos every week. It's been a minute, I know. It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I think, since the last one, but I'm trying really hard to have a weekly video. So yeah, turn on the notifications. That way you know about the next video. So without any more kind of interruption, let's talk about this episode in particular. So I recorded an episode on the infamous Jonestown massacre. So if you don't know anything about Jonestown, this particular incident is where we get the phrase "Don't drink the Kool-Aide," and it's such a sad story. So the massacre itself was November 18th, 1978, in Guyana. The People's Temple, which was a church based out of San Francisco, had kind of moved their congregation in a way, semi-moved their congregation down to Guyana in South America to start this agricultural program. So people, it was kind of a commune, basically. And people lived there, but they also grew their crops. And it was like a big community. And it seemed pretty utopic if you think about it. So their leader, Jim Jones, had kind of finesse, I guess is the word, his followers to come and live in this community. What people didn't know is there was a lot going on, and on this November 1978, about 918 folks committed suicide, including Jones. It was one of the biggest massacres ever to happen. So prior to that, I just want to tell you what happened. I kind of go into detail in the podcast, so I'm going to give you just a brief description of what happened. So Jim Jones started this church, this temple, in San Francisco, and basically he sold them a bill of rights. Basically, he kind of hoodwinked people into coming in and saying, I want this to be, especially during the time, because it started in the 60s when there was a lot of revolution going on. Civil rights movement. So he kind of brought in people with the notion that we're all equal, that we all deserve, a chance. Sort of selling them, this is more of a socialist kind of thing, that we all get equal pay, and they have training programs. It started off really well, the church did really well, and there were, all colors, sizes, and shapes at the church. He welcomed them all. I don't know what happened from its beginnings to what cultivated in Jonestown in November 1978, like what happened to him mentally, or if he was always kind of loony. But from the beginning, he told them, hey, I want everybody to equal, everybody's equal. And it seemed pretty, I mean, if you think about it, that seems great, especially in a time where there's so much racism and civil unrest. People are like, hey, you come here, we'll give you food, we'll train you, we'll do all sorts of things. So it sounded great. But as time kind of progressed, I guess Jones's true nature, or his true, I don't know what word I could use for that, but his true nature kind of came out, and he started kind of abusing the congregation. His inner circle, just to point out, even though he was like, I'm not a racist, I'm a good person, and I bring in all colors, his inner circle, the higher echelon of people, were white men. So people may have not noticed that, because they thought, they're like, hey, this guy's really looking out for us. So he started doing a lot of really questionable things, it obviously, the church was a cult, and he did a lot of questionable things where, for example, they found recordings of some of his congregation sort of defining him, and he would have them beat out of mass in front of everybody and kind of humiliate them. So he had these audio recordings, obviously because couldn't do video recordings of him sort of humiliating people. And he would like, there were whole families at this church, so he would pin family members against each other. So that was happening. So eventually the government got wind of this and wanted to investigate them, and we're kind of like pumping the brakes on them. So he got the bright idea, let's go down to Guyana and start a commune. And he brought people down, and apparently, you know, what sounded so utopic, like living in this place and growing food and being with my people, was kind of a slave labor camp. Like, he had them working like long shifts of hours, like, and then young kids, you know, were working a lot. So people were working 16, 18 hours in the hot sun in Guyana. I don't know if you know about Guyana, but Guyana can get very humidly hot. It's like a jungle, you know, and he had them working really hard. And it was just like one of those things where it was slave labor. So these families that were in there in the commune, they had no contact with the outside world. So they were slaves basically. So at one point in that November, like prior to the massacre, my understanding is the day of, a congressman from San Francisco and his team came down to investigate. So it was the day prior. They came in, they checked it out. Everybody was on their P's and Q's. I'm pretty sure he threatened them and said, hey, we're going to act like we're a big, happy family. And, you know, the congressman was about to leave and be like, hey, everything's cool here. Everything's fine. And then people started slipping him notes, like secret notes, like, hey, I want to get the hell out of here. And so he got concerned and got his teams like, hey, anybody here want to leave? You leave with us tomorrow when we go. And so a few people went. So they all gathered around, and they were heading to the airport. They were at the airport, and Jones sent his like thugs. So one of the other reasons why you're thinking, oh, so if you're in a commune and in the middle of the jungle, why didn't you just leave? Well, he had armed guards, so people couldn't leave. So they couldn't communicate with their family. They couldn't leave. So they were trapped basically. So they were trapped in this area, and he'd hire some thugs to, like, if anybody leaves, you shoot him. So the congressman was like, yeah, we're gonna leave. We're gonna get on these planes, and people were going. And so when they get to the landing strip, they're waiting for these two planes, and it's taking them a really long time. But as they're waiting, like a caravan of, I guess, militia that Jones had hired started shooting at them and started killing them. A few of them survived, obviously, but most of them died. At the same time, there was a group of people who, because of the chaos, had escaped into the jungle. So there was that small group. Overall, in what happened after the calamity at the airport, they got the word that the congressman had died. So I guess Jones panicked and started thinking, okay, so then we've got to do this. You know, he had been training these people. This is the other thing that's bonkers. Like, whoa. He had been training them for air raids because he thought that the FBI or the CIA or I don't know who he thought was going to come after him in the jungle. He thought someone was going to come after them in the jungle. So he started training them. Like, he would wake them up at like some odd hour of the morning, like 2 or 3 in the morning, so they can get ready if something happens. And he even tested a lot of them by giving them drinks and saying, would you pledge your loyalty to me and drink this drink? He lost it. And unfortunately, he had the money and the resources to kind of oppress these people and kind of scare them into thinking they had to stay. So, well, they had to stay because they had armed guards. If they tried to stay, they would kill them. So as that was going on at the airport, people came back and said that they were killed. He started the mass suicide. So the whole drink the Kool-Aide part, I don't know, I can't remember. Of course I can't remember what it was. I believe it's not cyanide. So he started making this big batch of like some fruit flavored drink and adding cyanide, and everybody had to drink it. There were kids there, there were children. So he had the children injected with the product. Apparently some people tried to escape, so they got shot. So it was just this big mess. He had everybody drink this and said it was time. So when finally they came down, it was like 918 people had died at this instance, which is insane and really sad. But that's where we get "Don't drink the Kool-Aide" from. A warning of, if you think about it now, a warning of just following blindly someone. And looking back, because I also watched this one doc with Jones's son. He had two sons. He had an adopted son and he had a biological son. And both his sons were away that day at a basketball tournament, and that's the only reason they survived. Just looking back at it and just seeing the kind of like the sort of psychopathic but narcissistic things that Jones had done, kind of wrapped it up in like, hey, I'm helping you out. But it's crazy. It's crazy that a story like this exists. It was just watching those docs, I was just like blown away. Like, how crazy, because I've heard the term "don't drink the Kool-Aide." I knew about Jim Jones, but I never knew the extent. Like, it's insane how, yeah, it's pretty insane. So that was the episode. If you haven't listened to the podcast, please go back and listen to it. I try to do every week a recap or an afterthought or an after party or whatever you want to call it, just to add on to anything or to just, give you a condensed version of what happened. So if you want to listen to the podcast, I'll have it in the description box. If you want to catch up and listen to the next episode of the next video that I'm going to do, I'll also have that at the bottom. Please like, subscribe, turn on the notifications so you can get more videos. Really appreciate all the support, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.